Oh, it's starting, and we are now live, according to this. Okay, so this week we are talking about this debacle that has happened in the NBA. Unless you've lived under a rock for the last few weeks, Donald Sterling, who is the owner of the LA Clippers, an NBA team, NBA franchise, had a private conversation with his girlfriend, and she recorded it. And in this conversation, he said some really racist stuff. He didn't want black people and minorities brought to his games. He's dating a minority woman, which was a really strange part of it all. But he basically said, I don't want black people at my games. I don't want minorities at my games. I don't even want Magic Johnson at my games. Don't bring Magic Johnson to my games. Don't want you associating with these people. She recorded all of this. I guess TMZ broke the story. TMZ got the audio. It's about 9 minutes. We'll actually post it with this podcast if you can stomach it. And yeah, it was some pretty atrocious stuff that was said. And we are now talking about the fact that he has been banned from the NBA for life. He is gone from the NBA for life. An NBA owner, I think this is the first time this has ever happened to an NBA owner, not the first time an NBA owner has gotten in trouble and fined, but he's been banned and fined $2.5 million. So based on this private conversation that he had with his girlfriend, he has now uh, lost his franchise, probably lost his girlfriend, lost a ton of respect, respect of fans, players. The world is kind of outraged and taking to the internet, much like this conversation. And so I wanted to ask the first question: do you guys believe the NBA has made the right call in regards to Donald Sterling's ban from the league for his racist statements?
Absolutely. It's about time that they're finally doing something about that. You hear stories quite often about how owners and coaches even will make comments that they're not getting in trouble for. So it's about time that the NBA finally stands up for the players. But that's just my opinion.
I would say that the NBA is a private franchise. Whatever we might think about the decision, it's theirs to do. I mean, um, and I think we would probably all agree that Donald Sterling's comments and his whole mindset are repugnant. I mean, it's just deplorable. Um, and the NBA is it's not a government agency. We don't need more government agencies. But so it's theirs to do as they see fit. I think, if anything, it's their business kind of thing. That's my thinking.
I agree with Glenn with that the NBA is a private business, but I guess I'm going to play the opposite side of the coin here. I heard a lot about the recording. Just started listening to it today, in fact, to actually know exactly what he said. And even though some of the things I don't really agree with, not knowing too much about his past history, I don't know if I would really. He seemed to be entrapped with what he was saying, so I guess I just don't really see as harshness. I'm not saying that there isn't anything absurd about what he said at all, but for the level of punishment he's given from this case just alone, I don't see that it's equal.
I guess for me, if I'm looking at this, like I hear you, Scott, on that, and one of the questions I was wrestling with all day is, does the punishment fit the crime? And I think the punishment fits the crime based on where you are in life. It's like, okay, if I did something wrong on that level, I'd probably lose my job where I work, right? I mean, that's pretty much the most that can happen. This guy owns an NBA franchise. He's a billionaire. He has tons and tons of money. And so when we live in a day and age where it's like, hey, you know what, we're gonna fine you, $100,000 for that stupid thing you said. Same thing that you do to basketball players, and they make that just for walking onto the court and lacing up their shoes, right? Oh, $100,000, big deal. I made that in one game, not a huge deal. So you've got a guy like Donald Sterling, who the punishment to fit the crime for him is $2.5 million fine, which is a drop in the bucket for someone like Donald Sterling. I mean, he'll feel it, but it's still a drop in the bucket compared to that's like $2.50 for us, or $250. Let's put it that way. But then having his franchise taken away is, I think, the next step above it, because if the fine is a drop in the bucket for this guy, what's really gonna hurt him? What's really gonna be something that teaches him the lesson that he needs to learn? How is he going to feel the pain necessary for the punishment to have any effect, so to speak?
Well, if we're looking for remediation, if we're really looking for Donald Sterling to be a changed man, it isn't going to be about fining him money. You can fine him all the livelong day. The man is kind of a scuzzy human being, and it's kind of obvious. That said, there's a couple of things that really trouble me here. And that is, though the NBA is a privately owned institution, they can do what they want. It seems to me there's two really troubling things here. Number one is his girlfriend, who I think is equally scuzzy, recorded a private conversation that they were having without his prior knowledge, which that is a crime. Think Richard Nixon. That is a crime, to record in an unauthorized way a private conversation. I don't think TMZ just happened to get a hold of this. I think she gave it to them. Certainly he didn't give it to them. The fact is that I'm sure he's somewhat humiliated that the whole world has to listen to this, and I listened to the whole thing. And quite honestly, as deplorable as I think this man is, she was entrapping him. It was clear. She's putting words in his mouth. I listened to the conversation, and she was actually putting words in his mouth and casting it in the worst possible way. Yeah, he's a bigot. No, but of course he's a bigot. But it was a setup job. Now, my question is, why don't I hear people screaming, she committed a crime, she needs to pay?
My point, though, would be the fact that if it wasn't something that's in his heart, there would be no way for him to have been entrapped in it in the first place. Regardless, yes, it was wrong that she recorded it without his permission, but still it remains the fact that it's something that he felt deep down inside of him, which is even more compounded by the fact that, I mean, I'm not a big fan of sports and whatnot, but I do know enough to know that the majority of most basketball teams have an awful lot of black people out there. So to say that you don't want your girlfriend seen in public, that's the real issue above and beyond anything else, at least in my opinion.
I guess I don't. Well, one, they're not Christians, so I definitely don't expect Christian behavior from non-Christians, right? So she entraps him. He says bigoted things. Neither of them are Christians. I'm not surprised by non-Christians doing non-Christian things at all. Is it illegal? Absolutely. But I think on a wider cultural scale, most of us. Well, one, a lot of us like to be outraged, right? You know, I'm not talking about my neighbor next door who's a bigot. I'm talking about this guy, Donald Sterling, who I don't know, who I'm never going to have any interaction with, and, you know, he's a bigot because he's in the news, right? So I think we don't care about her because to us, she's nobody. She's like our neighbor. I'm not going to confront her. She's in a way, she's a hero. She brought out the fact that this bigoted man has got his slaves on the plantation, so to speak, his basketball players or whatever you want to, however you want to characterize them. Some people have characterized them as slaves on the plantation, and this guy is the master, so to speak, with his bigoted views. But
yeah, it was Spike Lee.
Yeah, I think as a culture we don't care about her. We care about him. Is she equally at fault? Did she do something wrong? Absolutely. But I think the bigger question for people, the bigger problem for people, is someone who wields so much power and so much influence and owns this franchise, and he has minorities playing for them, and then he's caught saying something like, don't have anything to do with them. I wouldn't want anything to do with them if I didn't own this team and they weren't making me money. That's essentially kind of what the guy was saying. And trapped or not, like Emmett was saying, that's pretty crazy out there. Scott, what about you? What do you think?
So I guess we're kind of left on two different sides, because if you have power in any way, in owning a team, or being a manager of a business, or having anybody underneath you, you kind of sacrifice any personal thoughts or personal feelings. And in no way am I condoning any behavior of racism or any sort of hate in any non-Christian, Christian, any form whatsoever. But such as him and his girlfriend on a phone that he thought was private, where would be the line of public punishment, in the sense that
Hey, Scott. Scott, can you hear me?
what he said, I don't feel was, yeah.
Hey, do me a favor. Back up. You got some lag
You're
there.
cutting
Start
out.
over on that. I can edit all that out. Start over on what you were saying. You lagged there for a second.
Oh man, out of the train. All right. Of this coin, there's one of being a person. Is it happening again?
No, you're okay.
Am I lagging?
Nope.
Oh, sorry. There's two sides of the coin. There's one being a person, and having your personal beliefs, no matter what they are, despite if the common public agrees or disagrees with them. And then there's another side where if you're a mogul or someone that has power of any sort, owning a company, owning a team of any sort, you are held to a different standard where you cannot have those personal opinions, no matter how distasteful they are. Man, I lost my train of thought now. I'm sorry.
Well, if I could segue on that, I actually had a similar debate earlier today about this. The people I was talking to felt he deserved everything he got, and I guess it just didn't dawn on them that there's this thing called the 14th Amendment, and it's a right to privacy. Well, he's a public figure. I mean, wait a minute, hold on. Do we really want to go down that path that says if you're a public figure, the amendments to the Constitution don't apply to you? But somehow, if you're well known, you don't have the same constitutional protections as the rest of us? Do we really want to go down that road? And I think they back down off of that. What really scares me, Calvin, is that we're just, I think we're going down the road of thought crime. George Orwell envisioned a time when even having the wrong thoughts would be considered punishable. So here's a guy who's a bigot, and we all abhor that, and I think rightfully. But when did being a bigot become a crime? See, what you feel, however right or wrong, is not the measure of a crime. It's what you do. But we've now gone, I believe, started down this path of thought crime, a la George Orwell 1984.
I would definitely
I agree completely.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and I think that brings up a second question. Should people, regardless of their culturally accepted or not accepted private thoughts, should someone be fired, as in like Brendan Eich's case, the CEO of Mozilla created Firefox? I mean, kind of a big deal. He, I guess, donated $1,000 to support Proposition 8 back when that was a thing in California, and I guess all the people had voted for Proposition 8, and then it got overturned. So he was basically on the side of the people, and what they voted for in that state. And so years later, I guess a bunch of people said, well, he did that back in 2008, 2009. He needs to be fired, and so now he has exited Mozilla and Firefox because of this view that he held, back in 2008, 2009. We don't even know if his view has changed, but he's being punished, even if it hasn't changed. He's being punished for his privately held views about something. And then you've got Donald Sterling, who now is literally having his property taken from him. I mean, I don't agree at all. I mean, I'm a black man, okay? So, I mean, the stuff he was saying was aimed squarely at black people and other minorities, but he kept mentioning black people all throughout it, right? So I'm not happy about what he said. I would fight the rest of my life against that kind of bigotry. I have fought most of my life against that kind of bigotry. I've had to fight to explain to people that that kind of bigotry still exists, because some people just deny that it's even there, or deny it within themselves when they do say something bigoted and racist. Rabbi Glenn, you know exactly what I'm going through this right now. So, but I would stop. There have been people who have been bigoted towards me. I would stop short of saying, you know what, because you were bigoted towards me, I would stop way short of this. Because you were bigoted towards me, I'm going to have the federal government come and confiscate your land. They're going to confiscate your house. They're going to confiscate your car. They're going to confiscate and take your children away from you, all your property, and sell it off. Okay, so that's what's happening to this guy. I mean, I don't know exactly how it'll work. He owns the team, but he's been banned for life. So
I agree that that is going too far. Taking his property is too far. I mean, if that were the case, I'd own more houses in Holland than I'd know what to do with. If I went after people who were being bigoted towards me.
Right.
That's going too far. Taking the team away, I think, is only fair. If you don't want to have any associations with black people, then you certainly should not be owning a team full of black people. It just doesn't make any sense to me personally. Now, to take away his property and all that other stuff, that's a bit much. That's going above and beyond. But
what I'm saying is the team. I'm saying the team is his property. He owns the team. They're taking it away from him.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So I don't know that the punishment does. I don't know that that is right, because if you set that kind of precedent for Donald Sterling, as much as I hate what he's saying, what kind of precedent does that set for the rest of us? If I think something, I mean, at some point down the road, I mean, we're getting there now already with Brendan Eich. You know, if I disagree with homosexuality, or I disagree with abortion, or I disagree with gun control laws, or something that is disagreeable, and the popular culture thinks something else, what happens when we get to the point that you think this, so we're taking away your stuff? We're taking away your job, Brendan Eich, because you supported this 4 years ago. We're getting to a very Orwellian point, like Rabbi Glenn said there.
I'm not sure that the two are quite as, they're not at the same level. Brendan Eich was basically ousted. My understanding, and I could be wrong on this, is that Donald Sterling is simply not allowed to be at any LA Clippers games. He's not allowed to have any contact with the Clippers, not allowed to set foot in any NBA game. I was not under the impression, and maybe there's more to this than I knew, that the team was actually being taken away from him. He simply can't have any contact whatsoever, but as far as I know, he's still the owner.
Well, the article that Calvin sent us all did say that the commissioner is urging for the sale of it. It doesn't say that it's actually been taken from him. It is saying that he is in support of it being taken away, though.
Well, in other words, it would be sold off, and he, as the owner, would get whatever money he got for selling it.
Yes.
I think they want him out, and I can understand that, but that's not the same thing as taking his property away from him and saying, we as a community, in this case the NBA, are shunning you.
Okay, I could definitely see that. I would agree with that for sure. Okay, so I'll back off saying that it's taken away, but forcing a sale is kind of still suspect.
But still, there's a difference between recommending a sale and saying it has to be done, which the article you sent says that he recommends it.
But at what point, if you were a homeowner and someone, the government or whoever, came in and said, this is your home, but you're not allowed to go in it, you're not allowed to talk about it, you're not allowed to do anything with this home, having this sale is not, it's only leaving you so many options. And I think in that sense it's strong arming him into something that maybe he doesn't want to do. And again, I'm going to still stand on this point. If he was racist, why would he date a biracial woman? Why would he go out and purchase a team that he knows is mostly black people or anything other than his race? And I think there's more to this than just this small conversation, a small little tidbit of his life that we're seeing here.
Scott, with
Yes.
all due respect, I think that's probably a moot point. If we look at history, there's a great history of white people, like, back in slave times, the masters would go out and fool around with the black women, and they couldn't stand them, but they'd still go out and fool around with them. They owned whole armies of black people picking their cotton, but they couldn't stand them. So the fact that he's dating a biracial girl and owns a black team is kind of almost moot to the situation.
And I can see your point there.
Yeah, I think they just released a story of a guy who was like the Grand Master of the KKK, and he was caught in the back seat with a black woman who was actually a transvestite, so it was a black man. So that made it even more interesting. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's definitely happens. But okay, so one of the things I'm noticing about this conversation, though, and obviously I'm taking part in it, but we're talking a lot about this issue through the lens of our American ideals. The 14th Amendment, what if the government came in and took this away and XYZ, and obviously, we are called to be respectful citizens in the nation that we are a part of. Scripture calls us to that. But something I want to look at, briefly here is how do we bring our Christian worldview to bear on this particular situation right now? It's very easy for all of us to hop online again and from the safety of our blogs, from the safety of our podcast, talk about some dude and how what he's saying is wrong and evil, and this is the right thing to happen to him because XYZ, to join the rest of the culture. But how do we as Christians, how should we as Christians respond to this kind of matter? Because right now, if I brought it down to a personal level, I'm dealing with somebody in my life who is what I would consider bigoted. And Rabbi Glenn and I have been talking through this situation one-on-one as he's kind of been mentoring me through some stuff. But there's some, racial discord in my life that I'm dealing with, and I can't approach it the same way that the rest of culture is approaching Donald Sterling. So I'm wondering, how do we as Christians then look at this situation that is going on, that is on a national scale, that lots of people are commenting on in very, very culturally acceptable ways, non-Christian ways. I mean, like people are saying, string this guy up, burn him at the stake. I mean, horrible things are being said that are just as horrible as what he said. So how do we as Christians approach this topic, or do we have to approach it any differently than we already have?
I'm not sure it's our fight. However, as Christians, I think there is a sense in which we are expected to impact whatever society we live in, and this is true across all time and across the world. Wherever we live, we're supposed to have a godly influence that we exert in the culture. And, we can't control, nor can we punish people into having a godly view of humanity. I guess it requires wisdom on our part to think through, is this particular one a fight that we should take up? Maybe we just need to make sure that we are not guilty of bigotry, each of us individually. I mean, I can't control what anybody else does. All I know is God is watching. And aside from my public words, He knows my heart. Frightening thing as well as a comforting thing. He knows my heart. I guess I just need to make sure that there's none of that in me. Beyond that, I don't know whether we ought to be taking up this.
I would say, as a Christian, I would agree. It's probably not our fight. But as a human being who is supposed to be, the idea is that we were supposed to be working towards eradicating all this stuff, all this racial bigotry. I think something, in that respect, I think we are called to do something. Because as long as we continue to sit there and say, and I think that's been one of the biggest reasons why Christians continue to lose respect, is because we keep sitting back saying, well, that's not our fight. When do we get up and fight? We're seeing someone being racially how would you put it? They're treating a different race in a way that we know not to be right through the teaching. But then we also run into the tricky area of Paul saying, it's not right to hold Christian or non-Christians to Christian standards too, paraphrased, of course. So while as a Christian it may not be our fight, I think morally as a human being it is. And I think everyone needs to take it up. And if more people did and took it seriously, then people like this never would be in possession of a team where they could do this in the first place.
And Emmett, the cure for the whole thing, it's one and the same cure. This is the beauty of it. The gospel is what transforms us, right?
Absolutely.
God's word transforms us. And if we bring the gospel to a given situation, he's the one who does the transformation. So, as Paul says, the weapons of our warfare aren't carnal, but they're mighty and they're spiritual. So perhaps applying the truth of God's love for all of humanity, and perhaps especially the fact that we're told that we were enemies of God, and yet he loved us and sent his son. So in other words, we could say to the Donald Sterlings and his girlfriends of the world, the Lord God does not expect you to clean up your act and then you can come to him, but you have to come to him if you expect him to do a transforming work in your life. And by the way, yes, you are a sinner. So I think the cure is the gospel. So maybe if we just do what we're supposed to do, things will happen.
I agree with Rabbi Glenn. I was thinking about this today as my drive is like if Jesus was standing here right now and we were to ask him, like, what would we do? It would be very similar to the rich man asking Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And he would say, love the Lord your God and love your neighbors yourself. And that's what's most impactful. We could grab our pitchforks and join along with the raid against this owner, or we could do something so radical that would be hard to stand aside and it'd be hard to ignore. Just like all those other cases where love would be the last resort. In no way standing alongside of him and condoning his behavior, but showing him something that nobody else is showing around him is this love, not the forgive and forget, but the love that, you know what, like we all are sinners, we all fall short, and in that, like we still will help you. We'll if you want this, like we will offer it with arms wide open. And I think love is our number one command above anything else.
I think one of the obstacles to something like this is that people who are billionaires and are in that kind of position seldom have people in their lives that will speak hard truth to them. I think people come around, famous people, rich people, and essentially act like yes men to curry favor with them. And it's hard, I think, for somebody in that position to have somebody that will just tell them brutally the truth of where they're at. But you know what it reminds me of, you guys? It reminds me, the particulars of the Donald Sterling situation, reminds me of Aaron and Miriam coming against Moses because he had married an Ethiopian woman. She's called a Cushite. Cush was Ethiopia. He married a black woman. Aaron and Miriam got an attitude about it, and God called them out. He said, "What do you think you're messing with?" And smacked Miriam with a 7-day case of leprosy. She had to be outside the camp. I've always looked to that as a way of saying, you better be careful not to take attitudes against somebody, and in this case, an interracial relationship, because you don't want to end up in Miriam's shoes.
I think that I definitely, and I'll close this out, but I really liked what each one of you said. I think you hit things on the head in terms of focusing. I mean, certain things are not our fight, absolutely. I don't think that means that we should just be culturally agnostic all of a sudden. Like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. Like, if you're a writer and you write op-ed pieces every single week for the Wall Street Journal or whatever, as a Christian, you have a platform a platform that you continue to use. This podcast happens to be my platform, so I'm not doing anything that is unnatural. Like all of a sudden, like, oh, I hate Donald Sterling, so I'm going to start a blog. And like you're just starting it, doing something that's outside of your purview. However, I do think that people can do what Scott was saying, be radical, do something that is so radically different, but I think that you need to do those things in your spheres of influence. So if you are you're a soccer mom, you're a homemaker, you're raising your kids at home, and you're going to the park with your kids during the day, and you're talking to other moms, you know what? Infuse love in that situation. If you're a guy who clocks in and clocks out at a retail giant, infuse love in that situation. If you do XYZ, if you do anything, be love, show love in your area of influence rather than taking it upon yourself to judge someone who you're never going to see, you're never going to meet, you're never going to be influenced by other than this story, and you're never going to have influence in their life either. So I think that when it comes down to how can it be our fight, I do think it's our fight. I don't think that the specifics of things need to be our fight necessarily. Like Donald Sterling doesn't need to be my concern past this podcast, right? I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. But in a very real sense, the implications of what has come out of it is all of our fight. And how do we fight that? By showing love in our particular spheres of influence.
Yeah, and they came after the bigot NBA team owners, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a bigot NBA team owner, and then they came for me. That principle of if there are larger issues here. There's the issue of the freedom of thought, even if it's deplorable thought. There really are things that we need to be talking about with this. But I think we're all in agreement that we need to apply the gospel of Jesus to this situation if we're hoping to actually see the beginnings of transformation. Because otherwise, if we try the societal approach, to me it feels like putting a Band-Aid on a compound fracture.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. All right, well, guys, I think that was good. I think this is a good place to cut things off. Thanks so much for everyone being a part. It is now 10:30, which is pretty much right about when I wanted to stop. Thanks for your input, and I haven't decided whether this is going to go up like tomorrow, just kind of as a special edition, because normally they go up on Tuesday, but we'll see if it'll either go up tomorrow or it'll go up next Tuesday. We'll see how lazy I'm feeling tomorrow.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah. And Glenn, thanks so much for having you on. I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for a long time. And Scott, thanks so much for hitting me up and saying, hey, I want to be a part. It's so cool. You guys are always invited. Actually, David and I are putting together David's my co-host who couldn't be here tonight. We're putting together a long list of possible topics for the future and dates that we want to do those. So we'll be shooting those out to people who have been on the podcast in the past or who might know someone who could bring another voice to the podcast as well. So thanks so much for being a part. I'll let you guys go. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.